This meeting is being recorded.
There we are. All right. So good morning again. It is Tuesday, July 27th. I don't know about you, but I can't believe it's already past the halfway mark of the year. So we might as well say tomorrow is Christmas. Yesterday was New Year's. Today's session, we're talking about how to interrupt your bias in the moment, and following that, then how to model and break everyday bias, because it is something we really need to work on every day, myself included. I would also ask you all to, have some paper, something to write with, to take notes. As always, you feel free to unmute yourself. When you do that, I will mute myself to try to reduce any type of echo. I will also be keeping an eye on the chat section. We want to make this be interactive, and I'm always open to questions. After all, that's why we have these sessions. So thank you in advance for participating in today's session. Just as a review, I know that your organization has been partnering with us to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. So I'd just like to review the definition of implicit bias. So we know it to also be known as implicit social cognition. You may have either heard of or have taken sessions in the past called unconscious bias, the same thing. And we'll talk about, just briefly, implicit association. So we know implicit bias refers to attitudes and stereotypes. And what I like to focus on is that bias, even though it really has a bad rap, when people hear bias, they automatically think it's a negative thing or unfavorable. But it's important for us to remember that biases can be favorable. Some people may call them preferences, but biases can be favorable and unfavorable. However, they're typically activated involuntarily because these are things that we've grown up with. People we trust have passed this information along to us. So a lot of times we don't even know what we have in our subconscious that may be considered, we'll say in this case, an unfavorable bias. So the first thing I have is a quick question, and you're probably going to wonder what's this have to do with anything? But what I'd like for you to do is answer this question. Are there more words in the English language that starts with the letter K, as in Karen, or are there more words that have the letter K as the third letter? So your two choices, A and B. A is there are more words in the English language that starts with the letter K. Option B, there are more words in the English language that have K as the third letter. If you could respond in the chat. Make your selection and put it in the chat. And right off the top of your head, don't think too hard about it. Okay, all right, there we go. So everyone selected B. And the correct answer is, in fact, B. There are 3 times as many words in the English language that have K as the third letter in a word than words that start with the letter K. You guys are good because, when I first heard this question, I automatically thought it would be A, because you think right off the top of your head, kangaroo, kick, there are so many words. But the purpose of this question is to introduce you to what is called heuristic thinking, or HT, heuristic thinking. So what is it? And is it good or bad? Heuristics is a mental shortcut that simplify difficult decisions and help you to solve problems. They help us to avoid analysis paralysis. Okay, I don't know about you, but I have dealt with analysis paralysis on occasion myself. And it helps us to make judgments quickly and efficiently. So in that way, they can improve our decision-making effectiveness, but they can lead to mistakes. Scientists discovered this in the 1960s. So what I have here on the screen is talking about system 1, or also known as fast thinking. Now, there are 2 systems. I'm sure I've touched on this in previous sessions, but just as a review, system 1, or fast thinking, are those decisions that we make automatically. 2 + 2 = 4. Or if someone says black, I might say and white. Or if you're a Steelers fan, you might say black and yellow. So these are things that automatically come to mind when we hear something. Conscious thoughts may not always tell us when we have bias. So it's important for us to keep that in mind. Now, as this information is appearing on the screen, just to talk about system 2. System 2 is slow thinking, and it's when we engage in problem solving that takes a little more thought. You have to really consciously think about what you're doing. For instance, if you do your own taxes, you have to consciously think about the numbers that you are putting in the boxes so that you can either A, get the refund that you would like to get, or B, you're not having to pay any more taxes than you need to. It's also the thought processes that we use if you, for instance, have ever completed a financial aid application, the FAFSA. You're just not putting numbers in the box. In fact, you might have to do a little research to make sure you put in the correct information. But heuristic thinking is system 1, or fast thinking. So we might ask, how does it work? And I think we've all heard of fight or flight, right? What I would like for you to do is to put in the chat box what happens physically or even psychologically when you find yourself in a fight or flight situation. Go ahead and put that in the chat box for me now. Okay, rapid heartbeat, sweating. Yeah, we all, basically, yeah, the heartbeat, sweating. Can you think of anything else? How about anxiety? Of course, which leads to the racing heart or sweating. But you are absolutely right. Those are the physical responses. What scientists have discovered when they have viewed MRIs, they can see when implicit bias happens or when that fight or flight starts. When we look at a person and we may think, oh, they're not right for the job. We also have some of those same responses. Or when we're in a group and someone is speaking, we might interrupt them without thinking based on the group that they belong to. Uh-oh. There we go. Let's see. It's a part of our brain. I'm so sorry. I have all these different screens that are popping up here. There we go. When we engage in fight or flight, it starts in the amygdala, which is the oldest part of our brain. It's also referred to as the reptilian brain. It is what kept ancient man and their family group from allowing others into their group. It was a protection thing. So when our amygdala is activated, it tells the hypothalamus to activate that flight or fight or flight response. That activation of the amygdala takes 15 milliseconds. That's how quickly it engages. And a lot of times it engages before we even know it, if we're honest with ourselves. So less than a second is what happens when implicit bias is activated. Now, again, because I'm a nerd, I'll go a little deeper. All right, so we have multiple parts of the brain, but I'm just looking at two parts here, the basal ganglia and the prefrontal cortex. So our old information is stored in the basal ganglia. It's where memories are stored, implicit memories. For instance, motor memories, helping us to walk, one foot in front of the other. And it relies on the basal ganglia. It is the structure lying deep within our brain that is involved in a wide range of processes such as emotion, such as reward processing, habit formation, movement, learning, whatever your learning style is. My learning style is repetition and learning by doing. So that's where old information is stored. Working memory is a cognitive system with a limited capacity that can hold information temporarily. So in our, and that's where we have new information entering into our prefrontal cortex. So the reason why I even talk about these things that happen in our brain is because people can feel self-conscious, whether it's issues about implicit bias or other things that make them uneasy. But I like to let people know that this is the way we are built as humans, okay? So, but we have the ability to adjust the way we think about things, but understanding that if you have an unfavorable bias based on the media that you watch or whatever's on your Facebook feed or in your Twitter threads or anything else that goes into our brain. And I've talked previously about a psychologist who wrote the book Sway, S-W-A-Y, Pragwa Argawal, and I apologize for messing up her name, but the book is called Sway. She says that subconsciously we take in 11 million bits of information per second. That seems overwhelming, but we don't even think about it. Conversely, consciously, we can only process 40 to 50 bits of information per second. So that leaves 10,999,000 plus bits of information in our subconscious that we are not even aware of. Remember, from media, books, friends, whatever it is. So it's no wonder that sometimes our natural response is to default to a bias, favorable or unfavorable. So what we want to talk about today is interrupting your bias in the moment. So when it is active, like I mentioned, scientists can see when it's activated in an MRI. So when it's activated, you're in a physical and a neurological process that moves really fast and it's largely out of your control. Okay, but that doesn't mean bias has to take over your decision making. As a, for instance, when you are stressed about something, there are ways for you to calm yourself down, whether you use apps like Calm, C-A-L-M, it's an app for your phone, or you do mindfulness breathing, of which my colleague, Annie, who will be presenting to you next, she is our mindfulness expert, and she's very good at talking about taking those cleansing breaths to calm yourself down. So just like you can do that, you can interrupt the process of implicit bias in the moment. So here are just 3 ways. There are many, but here are just 3 ways that you can interrupt implicit bias in the moment. Number 1, remind yourself of your own biases before you make a decision about a person. If you're in a position to assign projects, you might think whether or not you can trust them with an important project, even if it's something socially. You might think about, do I want to sit with this person at lunch? Remind yourself of the biases you may have. And actually, this number 1, reminding yourself of bias, is number 1 in the steps that I talk about in helping to eradicate your own implicit biases. Be introspective. And when you're being introspective, you want to think about your history. You want to think about where you grew up, whether it's different parts of the country, different parts of the world, or even different parts of Central Ohio. We all have different cultures that we bring to the table. We are not monolithic. So we may have been taught something, again, growing up, that may be considered a bias, like, oh, I can't sit with those people at lunch, or I'm not going to listen to certain other people. Maybe they have a foreign accent, which unfortunately, language biases sometimes lead people to think, oh, if you have an accent, then you're not intelligent. So number 1, we need to remind ourselves of our own biases. Number 2, examine the facts. If you have a gut feeling about a person, pause before you make a decision about them. As I mentioned, like whether or not to listen to them. It might be the quiet person on your team. And that one time that they decide to speak up, some people might be inclined to either be shocked that they have an opinion, or other people might be inclined to just ignore them. Conversely, it might be the person that's always talking in the team meeting, in which case some people might automatically turn off. And that's a bias. So we want to make sure that we keep those things in check. Like I say, take the personal out of personnel. Keep our biases in check. So what if it's somebody who always talks? The time that they're giving some feedback might be some relevant information. So we want to use our slow brain and ask ourselves, am I feeling this way for a valid reason? Okay, so there's a lot of behind the scenes thinking that each of us should do. Number 3, see things from the other person's perspective. Imagine how the other person might feel in a particular situation. You might ask yourself, if I was in that situation, would I feel like I'm being treated unfairly? Might I be feeling frustrated because my opinions are being overlooked? This can be a powerful tool because often our implicit biases don't feel consequential to us in the time that we are making those decisions. Okay, I have another quiz for you, and I'll ask you to put your answers in the chat. Here's our quiz. We have Rob, the manager of the team, and we have Kenny, a younger team member. So Rob is in charge of deciding which of his team members will get to go to a major conference with him. He's not sure if he wants to bring Kenny, who happens to be Black. He's new to the team and he's young. So Rob's gut feeling is that, you know what? Kenny might be too junior to go. But what he might want to do is to put himself in Kenny's shoes and determine how he might feel about whether or not he should go to that conference. Now, Rob does know that he might have implicit biases against Black people, but he can't shake the gut feeling that he's too young and he's too new. So my question is, what else can Rob, the manager, do to interrupt bias in the moment? So here are our options. Option A, Rob can keep a journal about his actions. Option B, Rob can ask a coworker to observe his actions as he works with his team. Option C, he can decide Kenny is too new to the team to attend the conference. And option D, Rob can evaluate the facts and ask himself, under normal circumstances, would Kenny attend this? Thank you very much. I see you already putting the answers in the chat. I see a couple of D's in there. What does everyone else think? All right. Have some more D's. Okay, great. Let me scroll up here in the chat. So the general consensus is D, and that is the correct answer. Rob should evaluate the facts. Would Kenny normally go to this conference? So by focusing on the facts, sorry for that typo, I thought I fixed that. By focusing on the facts, does junior employees typically go to this conference? Yes. So Rob then realizes that his implicit bias that he is aware of, remember I said he was aware that, maybe he has some biases against African Americans. So then he decides to go ahead and invite Kenny to the conference. So congratulations on that. But great news. A lot of times when we have these discussions, again, people start feeling bad about it, but there's always a way around it, or there's always hope. So let's talk about that. Unconscious, i.e. implicit bias, is a habit that can be broken. So to break a habit, you need to replace it. Okay, just like if you're a smoker or someone who's a smoker, and we see the advertisements all the time, try Nicorette or whatever gum options are available, or a patch, or even if you're trying to modify your eating plans. Again, I try to steer away from the word diet. I used to use it all the time. Maybe it's because I struggle with it myself now, but it's about managing an eating plan. So to break the habit of not always, okay, I'm not going to tell on myself, but to break the habit of ending up in the McDonald's drive-thru, my replacement is to do meal planning. So that for me, if I have food readily available, healthier options, I'm less likely to find myself, which I swear my car just automatically, it's not me, it's my car, that finds itself in the McDonald's drive-thru. So again, to break a habit, you want to replace it. So here's the next question for you. If you would put in the chat for me, how long does it take to break a habit? Let me know what you think. How long do you think it takes to break a habit? Okay, I see 21 days. Thank you, Chelsea. 30 days from Jennifer. Any other guesses? There's no wrong answers. You'll be surprised. Okay, so we'll go with the 21 days and the 30 days to break a habit. 21 days is something I've heard probably most of my adult life as to how long it takes to break a habit. Scientists tell us that it takes an average of 18 to 254 days or longer to break a habit. We've all heard about the 12-step program. It's an everyday thing. And in some situations, it's a by the minute thing to break a habit. So an average of 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic. And then you still need to work on that. And this information is from a Dr. Nora Volkov. She's the director of the National Institutes of Health on drug abuse, and suggests that the first step is to become aware of your habits so that you can develop strategies to change them. Just like I told you with my eating plan, I realized that, again, if I don't have food on me or available to me, I'm automatically going to go to fast food. And a lot of people are like, I can't believe that. It's true. It's true. We all have our vices, and I don't know what they put in McDonald's fries, but it's a hard habit to break, as the song would say. So activities that are linked in your mind to certain habits, we want to change those behaviors towards those. So again, breaking a habit means you have to have something to replace it with. So I want to just briefly review 3 ways to replace biased habits. And in this case, unfavorable biased habits. Number 1, stereotypes. You know, there's stereotypes about women. There's stereotypes about most ethnicities. We want to fight unconscious bias at the place it gets into our brains. So if we listen to unfavorable biases and read about unfavorable biases towards women, we want to counter that. We want to either do research or watch movies or read books or listen to audibles like I do about strong women. The same would be for any type of ethnicity. I mean, are Italian people always talking with their hands and talking loud? Sure, we may all know Italians that are like that, but not all Italians are like that. I'll be real. There's a stereotype about Black people that they can never get anywhere on time. Well, you want to look at information. If you don't have a friend or someone you could speak to, look at other information about people who might be late to things. Who is it? Maybe in Spain or Italy, they have siestas, or in certain island locations, they kind of just go with the flow. So stereotypes that they assign to Black people aren't, it just doesn't apply to them. It applies to other people. So you want to do things to counter those familiar stereotypes. So here's an example. If you usually watch television shows and movies that have a majority white male cast, make time to watch television programs and movies that portray women and minority groups in positive ways. So that's just one way you can do that. Another way you can do that is by joining different groups, just like the Pickerington Chamber or other organizations where there's a diverse group of members, and that can also help to counter familiar stereotypes. Number 2, replace non-inclusive language. Language does shape the way we think. I mentioned just briefly, with language bias, sometimes people with foreign accents are considered to be less intelligent. I don't know where that came from, but it is certainly not the truth. Or with language bias, someone from the South with a strong Southern drawl. Unfortunately, there are familiar stereotypes that people with a Southern drawl, again, might not be as intelligent. We also know that not to be true as well. So what we want to do is to replace the language you use with thinking with thoughtful, inclusive language. And here's an example. Instead of saying, hey guys, say, hello everyone, or hello team, and do it that way. Hey guys is a tough one for me. It's one that I'm currently working on breaking that habit because it's something I grew up with. I don't use that as an excuse, but what I try to do now is to think more inclusively. It's, let's see, here's an example. Remember the commercial for Ace Hardware. It used to be Ace is the place with the helpful hardware man. Well, Ace came up into the 21st century and replaced that with Ace is the place with the helpful hardware person, because not just men work there anymore. So those are just a couple of examples. Number 3, find people who break the stereotype. You know, unconscious bias causes stereotypes to fly around in our brain all day. Remember those 11 million bits of information that we subconsciously take in versus the 40 or 50 that we consciously process. So I would ask that you imagine people, but imagining people who counter those stereotypes can weaken them. Here's a couple of examples. Common stereotypes in books, in media, that reinforce, and I'll replace it, that reinforce people who need to who need to use wheelchairs as weak or helpless. I know I'm not the only one who's been in the airport where someone is being pushed in a wheelchair and they get to the gate and the gate agent is speaking to the person pushing the wheelchair. For whatever reason, they assume that the person in the wheelchair might have some cognitive difficulties, which is not always the case. Maybe the person pushing the wheelchair might have some cognitive difficulties, but that is one stereotype that I see quite often. So to combat that stereotype, we might want to take a moment to meditate. And I know here we're talking about strong women, but I'm going to talk about someone in a wheelchair. In fact, just last week, I read an article about healthcare workers, specifically doctors, who use wheelchairs. And they were saying in this particular article that they're considered to be weak and maybe not the best doctor. Can you imagine? First of all, okay, I've not been to medical school, but I used to work in the medical field. Anyone who graduates and gets an MD has done so based on their mental acuity. And nowhere, you can't be weak. So unfortunately, people who are differently able are still struggling in the 21st century to be respected the same way as anyone else is. So we really need to expand our thought processes on some of those age-old stereotypes. So you want to find people who break the stereotype. That will be helpful. So here's the situation. Wallace thinks he has an unconscious bias against his Somali coworkers. He changed the language he uses to be more inclusive. What's something else he can do to break the habit of unconscious bias against Somali people? And I'll pose that question to you, whether it's Somali people or Nepalese people or any of the people who are newer Americans. I'll say Asian people. You know, we've had a focus in the media, not that it's new, but the focus on some of the discrimination and unfortunately violence against Asian people. So I'm going to post that question to you. If you would put that in the chat, what are some things you can do or that Wallace can do to break his unconscious bias against Somali people or people that he finds different? Thank you, Teresa. Learn more about their culture to better understand. Great idea. Anyone else have any other suggestions? Spend time with people from Somali. Great suggestion. Great suggestion. So we'll go with those two. If you are unaware, some of you probably are because you all are up with current information, Columbus has the second highest population of Somalis in the country, behind Minneapolis. So we have a huge population here. So spending time with those people, asking questions, doing research online. Here are some other examples of what can be done. Find images that counter stereotypes and put those photos where he's likely to see them. B, apologize to the people he may be biased against, only if he has found himself engaging in an unfavorable bias towards them. I don't know if I would just walk up to someone and say, I'm so sorry I'm biased against you. And they're like, what are you talking about? Especially if it's somebody you don't know. He could also ask a coworker to hold him accountable. Accountability partners are important, and you want it to be someone that you trust. D would be nothing. Breaking the habit is more about awareness than action. So I would cross out D, of course. So he could watch a TV show with a Somali main character or read about Somali people in powerful roles. I know what I have done personally, like I try to do with different ethnicities, I try to learn a few phrases in their language. Maybe it's a little bit extra, but I find it to be very interesting, and it's a great way to start a conversation. For instance, I learned, and the Somali language is very difficult to learn, at least for me, maybe because I'm, a little elderly, but I have learned a couple of phrases. One is good morning, which is Suba Wanagsin. And you can find this online. Just Google how to say good morning in Somali, or good afternoon is Galab Wanagsin, or, what's up, what's going on, is Iska Warren. Thank you, Zulene. Yes, visit their community and restaurants too. I'm glad she mentioned that. Like, I've been in the Global Mall on Morris Road next to Old Time Pottery. And when I go into a store, because there's this air freshener that I love that I found in there, and I go into the store and I say, Iska Warren, or good morning or afternoon in their language, and you just see their faces light up. Just like if I go into a Chinese restaurant, first of all, got to make sure they speak Chinese. And if I say thank you, xie xie. And what that means to them is I'm vested enough to find something about their culture. Now, then I have to cut it short, because sometimes they will start talking and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I only know those few phrases. And I've also found myself in a situation with different Somali people. Number one, we have to remember that they're not monolithic. Somali may not be the largest country, but even within the Somali community, they have different cultures and even some slightly different pronunciations. That's right, visit their restaurants, delicious food. There's some great restaurants off of Cleveland Avenue, and I go in there and, I say the phrases that I know, and they're like, oh, thank you, sister. And they teach me a little bit as well. So it helps me out, and it also helps them to feel a little more welcome in a land that sometimes isn't always that welcoming. So just a few things to remember, or one thing to remember, the next time you make a decision about how to interact with another person in a situation, like we talked about, focus on the facts, not the feeling. Remember, we're not just talking about ethnicity here. We're talking about all of the different dimensions of diversity, be it gender, be it religion, be it language, be it position at work. Just because someone is not a team lead or a middle manager or a director doesn't mean that their opinions are less valid or less relevant than someone in those positions of leadership. So whether you just get along with someone or they just rub you the wrong way, I would ask you to dig deeper into where those feelings come from. And it may be that you find that those feelings, i.e. unfavorable biases, are not really valid. So that would be my suggestion for you to do in those cases in interrupting bias and replacing those biases. So I would open up the chat for you. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to contribute those now. Or if anyone else has any suggestions as to what they have done to interrupt bias and to replace those habits. Yeah, learning a little bit of the language. Of course, you know, you might get a few Snickers from them. And I'm not talking about Snickers that, you know, like hangry and things like that, but some chuckling, but they so appreciate it because it's almost like, who doesn't love the sound of their own name? Okay. Who doesn't love the sound of their own language? And I will confess, one of my trips a couple of years ago, I think I was going to Cancun, and I was in the airport in Mexico City. And okay, number one, I had my Ohio State t-shirt on, which is so amazing. No matter where I go in the world, all of a sudden I hear this OH. And of course I was like, IO. And by the way, do you speak Spanish? So I was ecstatic to hear someone speaking English and calling out OHIO. But so, you know, just really taking that extra step. And it's not hard. Again, you can just look it up online. So that's all I have for you today. If no one has any other comments or questions, I would turn it back over to Teresa for any comments based on this session. Then I understand my colleague Annie will be up next. Teresa, I'll mute myself.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. That was fantastic. And, you know, always such a good reminder of the things that we need to do to look at interrupt our bias. And that was, I mean, obviously that's the topic today, but it's always just a good reminder to, you know, walking through the airport is a great example. I just did that last week, and, you know, you walk through the airport and you see all these different faces and you immediately think things about people, and you shouldn't. And because you don't know, and you don't know, you know, what it's like to walk in their shoes. And so I thank you. Always great. So any other comments or anything for Karen? Awesome. Thank you again.
My pleasure. And I will log out. I understand your meeting will continue, but I appreciate you having me today and for partnering with Citywide Training and Development. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen. So Annie, we are jumping over to you. Annie, are you with us?
You know, if she thought that you were going to be starting at 9:30, I know she's on here, but
gotcha. Well,
yeah,
then why don't we, everybody who needs to take a break, you can take a break. So restroom break, coffee break, whatever it is that you need. And then we'll come back and get started when Annie jumps on with us. Hi, Annie. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you? I heard that you were taking a break. I just was on, but kind of moving in and out. So we'll start at 9:30 for anyone that's on here. And
Okay.
I will just let everybody take a break and let me know if you have questions in the meantime. I'll be here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Annie Stair. Good morning. We'll start in 5 minutes. So I know that you're on a break right now, but in the meantime, just make sure that you have a note or something to write with, and then something to write on to take some notes. And then I'm here if you have any questions, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you. Good morning, I'm Annie Stair. We have 1 minute till we get started, so hopefully you're all back from your break. I got to see a little bit of Karen's previous presentation, which looked and sounded very interesting. So I'm glad she kicked you all, or us all, off today. So we'll get started here talking about becoming civil in a diverse workplace. And are we waiting for anyone? Everyone back?
I think we can probably go ahead and get started.
Go ahead and get started. Okay, excellent. All right, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Annie Stair. I've worked with Citywide Training and Development for a little bit over 8 years now. And I have worked developing curriculum and facilitating our training courses, which are varied. And this particular topic, becoming civil in a diverse workplace, is very relevant right now. It's definitely a topic that's trending, and for good reason. Our workplaces are more diverse than ever. We have a lot of work to do for our workplaces to become more diverse. But the idea behind this class is not only are our workplaces diverse, but how do we work within that environment? And how do we make those environments work to our advantages? We know studies tell us that more diverse workplaces make us better, make us more creative, make us more able to be efficient and successful. So we know that, but how do we make that work to our advantage, to the advantage of our coworkers, and to the advantage of our organizations and teams as a whole? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I feel fortunate to work in a very diverse workplace, working at the City of Columbus. So I feel like I have the ability to work with people from varied ages, from varied backgrounds, from varied races. And because of that, I feel like I am a better employee. And so I encourage you to continue to hire diverse workplaces, and also to thrive in them by embracing the diversity that you have, whatever that may be. Everyone's workplace looks different, but everybody can take something from this class and apply it to better themselves and their organizations. All right, so that was a lot. Just a little bit of background also about myself so you have an idea. My background's in education. I have a master's in education. My undergrad is in journalism, so I worked in PR for a bit as well, in addition to education. And so I work a lot at the city with building resumes, with helping develop interview skills, and teaching all of our supervisor courses and all of the different trainings that we offer. So I would love to hear from each of you. I know that we have 6 people on here. So we'll do brief introductions if you don't mind. I apologize if you already did that, but it's good for me to know each of you, where you're coming from, and then also just what, I know this is diversity training for you, but just let me know a goal or an expectation, something that you're looking to get out of this particular class. You may be here because it's mandatory. However, just let me know why you're here, so what you want to get out of the class. All right, so I can just go through your names if that works. Is that okay with everybody? So that we're not all speaking at once? Okay, great. Enough about me. Teresa, can you start us off, please?
Absolutely. Teresa Byers, president of the Pickerington Area Chamber. Obviously, we are the ones who, worked with you guys and Kenston and your team to put these on for our members. And our whole goal is really just to educate anyone who's interested in learning more about diversity and inclusion, and how we can be a better community together, and how we can have a stronger chamber based on that diversity and inclusion. So that's really why we're here.
Excellent, thank you. Jennifer Bleen. Oh, and I meant to mention, if you are unable to speak up and unmute yourself for whatever reason, I know we're all working in different work environments, you can just share in our chat and I can read that aloud to everybody. So feel free to do that instead. Okay, Jennifer Bleen. Hi.
Hi, how's everyone? So I'm, as far as, I forget the questions, it's what we're doing and why we're here, or what our roles are?
Yeah, just let me know your position within your organization, and then let me know a goal that you have. So something that you're looking to get out of today.
Oh, okay. So I'm a small business owner, and I offer consulting and coaching practices for software development organizations. And so, you know, I work with different size companies right now. I'm primarily working with some Canadian companies, but besides that, I'm just here to learn and to grow, just always looking for, anytime there's a topic that looks interesting, just professional development, because these are things that I can bring back, not only for myself, but back into the client as well, as ways to just observe what I'm seeing in different, you know, through different lenses. So that's really what I'm looking forward to, is just kind of getting some different perspectives. And I find it funny, your picture, I think that's my neighbor, Rick, on your, is it picture? I'm like, I took a snapshot, I sent it to him, I go, is this you? He hasn't replied back yet.
It is Rick. That is Rick on there. So Rick Morrison, who works with us, he's a huge asset to our department. So that's funny that he's your neighbor. Yep. That's Rick. I think you're right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chelsea Huffman.
I am with the chamber also. I am the events coordinator there. Something I'm hoping to get out of this, as someone who isn't, I mean, I'm not faced with racism every day, and as just a white female, I mean, to put it bluntly, and so it's hard for me to keep this as, like, this is a very important issue and topic, especially in our culture right now, and it's something that I want to have a voice on. I mean, and I feel like I don't know what to say. Like, I'm developing a voice and a way to be an advocate for people who don't look like me. And I just want to learn as much as I can. And Annie's presentation was, or I'm sorry, Karen's presentation. I'm sure yours will be great, Annie. But Karen's presentation was so good about the, like, what you think in your subconscious without even realizing it. So just, I mean, things like that I can slow down. And she also talked about, like, mindfulness and just introspection, like learning how to do that in a situation that I'm faced with, like where that's necessary. So yeah, just to learn and listen and just soak it up.
Thank you. Yes, Karen's presentation is so interesting, and I feel like it's nice to think about this from the perspective of your subconscious and the science behind it all, how your brain works and how your brain takes in information. I know Karen mentioned on her presentation that idea of mindfulness is really important, and just slowing down sometimes to take information in so that you're able to learn and observe before you speak. And sometimes just slowing down will help you to be more aware of what's going on around you, and to just shift any perspective that may need to be shifted. We talk a lot at the city, and we have another diversity class that focuses a lot on the idea that we all have biases, and we need to stop. We need to stop just ignoring those biases. What we need to do is embrace them, and we need to realize that once we're aware of what our biases are, then we can really take action to treat people the way that they should be treated. But the worst thing that we can do really is to ignore the fact that these biases are ingrained in us. And the best thing we can do, and as far as diversity goes, is to realize that we have them and then think about how to work with those within ourselves. So it sounds like you have a lot of great ideas, Chelsea, so thank you for sharing. Zuline?
Good morning, Annie. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been doing these classes with and without my team for the last year and a half. And it's just basically really wanting to grow and develop, and then also, you know, take back what I've learned to the team so we can apply that not only within our environment, but how we work with our clients as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. All right, Melissa.
Good morning.
Hi.
I'm one of the Violet Township trustees, and I serve a very diverse population, so I'm always interested in improving and being better in order to represent everybody.
Excellent. Thank you. And did I miss anybody? Okay, great. All right, I love our group size too, because we'll have opportunities to share. So please speak up. You can talk and I can unmute you if that's necessary. You can just ask me to unmute. And then you can also utilize that chat. And that's a great option for us. I see that you used it previously with Karen, so we'll just continue on with that. So in that, you can give me any feedback. Let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you need me to slow down or if you need to move on. If I'm talking too long on any points, I'm to your benefit. And that's also why we do those introductions. It's so important because I want to know where each of you is coming from so we can really cater this. All right, so there you go. That's the beautiful picture of our team right there. So we all are versed in talking about diverse workplaces, so we're here to do that today. All right, so let's talk about our objectives. I will be honest, this is a lot of information, so just bear with me and we will keep this interesting. So understanding what uncivil behavior is and the causes. So that's what we're going to do. In order to know how to be civil, you need to understand what uncivil behavior is. What does that look like? We've likely all experienced that at some point in our workplace, and it's not what we want. So I often say it's good to know what not to do in order to know what to do. So we'll talk about that. Strategies to prevent uncivil behavior. So it happens, but how do we keep it to the absolute minimum or keep it not happening at all within our workplaces? We're not perfect, but we want to create environments that are comfortable for people, create environments in which people can thrive as well. Creating a culture of inclusion. So just using the word inclusion consistently within your workplace is important. So say it out loud. When you in upper management or wherever you are, make it a priority, you need to say it out loud. You need to talk about the fact that you're creating a culture of inclusion, because it's easy to create it, but you have to be explicit about it. So we'll talk about that. All right, so what is uncivil behavior? Uncivil behavior is repeated, intentional, and malicious abuse of a targeted person. The use of words or deeds to disempower people. Lack of manners. Manners go very far in general. I know we teach our kids to have manners. It's one of the first things that I taught my kids was to have manners. And that's for life. So that goes far within the workplace, within your personal lives as well. And you're going to notice all of this is going to lead into the next point. So it all intertwines. psychological or physical violence, and then an attempt to control another person. And that can also happen subconsciously, inadvertently. So in order to understand why we don't do that, you need to reflect, am I doing this? Have I seen this happen in my workplace with other people? Awareness is key. So why does this all happen? So repeated intentional malicious abuse, lack of manners, attempt to control another person. Why does it happen? All right, and there's a lot of reasons. A lot of insecurities can stem this, and then downsizing and competition to survive. So we're in difficult times right now still. So hopefully we're starting to come out of this pandemic, but we're still in it. So there's been a lot of competition. There's been a lot of struggle for people to survive with their organizations. A lot of places have gone out of business. A lot of people are struggling within themselves just to find overall quality of health. So that's mental health, emotional health, and all of that wears on us. So this is growing right now because we're in a time of even more struggle than usual. Life is hard as it is, and then stick a pandemic on top of it, and that doesn't help the situation. So there's a lot of competition right now. Also, love of the game, a desire to stay in control of others. So sometimes that competition turns into that love of the game, that desire to win, that desire to stay in control of other people. So a lot of this lack of civility can stem from that. Definitely a heavy workload. So I know I've heard it at the City of Columbus before that oftentimes when someone's hiring or trying to fill another position within a department, other people may be taking over work, double the work that they're used to doing because they're at a hiring freeze or they're in process of hiring somebody. So when you have a heavy workload, that can be stressful, and that can cause you to act in an uncivil way to other people. Hand in hand with that, lack of resources. So we're all working with a lack of resources to a certain extent, right? Because we have limited budgets. And so the severity of that is just going to vary. So how that impacts workplaces can cause uncivil behavior. If people don't feel like they have enough support with their materials that they're working with every day, or with the workloads that they have, they can act uncivilly. Personal inadequacies or prejudices. That goes along with that discussion I was talking about earlier, that we all have biases. So if people aren't trained to work within those biases and to know how to treat people civilly, if they're not educated to do so, if they're also not trained in their positions and they feel personal inadequacies, generally speaking as well, that's going to affect how they perform, also how they act civilly to coworkers. And then a lack of consequences for inappropriate behavior. So your procedures need to be really clear, your processes need to be really clear. People need to know the policies and know that they're expected to act respectfully within their workplace, and that needs to be outlined for them consistently. They need to have reminders of that, and then also they need to be trained properly when they're hired. So these are not all of the causes, but many of the causes for which people act uncivilly. All right, so if you have people acting uncivilly within the workplace, you want to deal with these difficult behaviors, deal with these personalities. So we're first going to discuss the bully. We all have an image of what that may be in our heads. I often think back to the playground, right? These behaviors are ingrained so early in us, and a lot of times we put walls up so that we can protect ourselves. And that's oftentimes what these bullies are doing. So a lot of characteristics that we'll list here, and then we'll talk about some strategies in how to handle bullies or bully behavior. So bullies typically blame others for mistakes. It's not their fault, typically. They criticize ability and accomplishment. So instead of being happy for other people, they criticize them or think that other people didn't deserve the recognition that they got. Insulting, patronizing, and put other people down. Lots of questions and cross-examination unnecessarily. So questions are good. You want your employees to be curious, but you want them to be curious about the right things, right? And so not questioning people's credibility or people's ability to do their jobs. Questioning processes, right? If they're trying to learn and grow, but they don't need to unnecessarily question people's ability. Oftentimes bullies make unreasonable demands. They oftentimes withhold information from people or shut people out. Knowledge is power. Information sharing is power. So if somebody's withholding information or hoarding that information because they want to be the one that is all knowing, then that's a red flag. It shows that they are clearly insecure with their abilities. And so it's not good to withhold information. It's good to share information. Make nasty or hostile remarks to target while being nice in front of others. So this is definitely that game behavior. And then also sabotages work by giving misinformation or direction. And this is just inefficient. So you don't want people like this working at your workplace. You want to change this behavior because it creates inefficiency. All right, so how do you handle these bullies? What do? Use humorous self-talk, validate yourself. So know that it's not you, it's them. Back to that tried and true idea, it is very true. Ask a colleague or a friend for a second opinion. So to say, all right, I want to make sure that I'm not seeing this incorrectly. Let me run this by you. What are your thoughts on this situation? And then when you do that, you don't need to use people's names. You can still remain confidential. You can just say, this happened to me. What are your thoughts? All right, and then explain why you cannot meet them and ask for assistance. So if someone's making a reasonable demand, you don't have to necessarily address that. Okay, you can ignore that. You can find another path for yourself because oftentimes it's a waste of time. If you do address it clearly and refrain from making any situation personal. Stick to the facts. And then you can schedule an informal meeting to address the issue. You can also schedule a formal meeting to address the issue where you have support of another individual there. I like to have support of another individual there in situations that you're addressing a bully, because that gives you support and that also gives you protection, right? Because someone's there to observe what the conversation and what gets brought up and is happening, so that things are handled in an honest way. I work in HR, so that's what we do. We make sure that we have transparency, that we write down anything that needs to be written down, and that we have support for people. Bring up problems immediately, and then work to find solutions. Use the team approach to resolving problems. So this idea that we're all better when we're working together. And then ask for clarifications of instructions and then write them down. So these are all clear ways as to how to handle a bully or difficult situations. All right, so dealing with difficult personalities, mobbing and groupthink. So the idea is that we're not all robots. We're dealing with different personalities every day. That's always going to be challenging. Differences are good, but they're also challenging. So the better that you get to know your teams and understand what people are good at, then the better off you'll be. So characteristics of mobbing or groupthink. initiates innuendo and rumors, publicly discredits the target, enlists the help of emotions of others, so involves the management, negative, abusive communication, ridicules target personalities, sends verbal or written threats, displays aggressive physical action that isolates target from others, brands target as difficult. So you know those individuals that you can just generalize and say, oh, they're just difficult. Okay, it's a way to get around dealing with real issues. And it's easy to say that about someone that you just decide that you don't like, right? And there's no place for that within the workplace. Takes work away and gives target insignificant tasks to do. This is huge. This is often done to people when you want to minimize their talents or minimize what they do well. And then assign work with little or no direction. So set a person up for failure. So you assign someone a job, but then you don't provide them the support and the training that they need. That's a huge problem. So how to handle this mobbing and groupthink. Address it immediately, enlist support from others, maintain your calm. Restate using I statements. I statements are very key so that someone feels like they're not being attacked, so that you're speaking from your own perspective. Ask for respect, feed your self-esteem. Don't weigh in. So don't, in other words, waste your time on situations that are not moving you forward. Take it to a higher level or to authorities. HR is there for you for a reason. So if you have any question about behavior, just give your HR a call. Feel comfortable talking to your upper management about situations that are questionable. Identify ways to maintain contact in a positive way, in a positive mode. Don't complain. So don't be that complainer. Keep your dignity. Stick to the facts. And then develop an exit strategy. Provide excellent work quality. So just continue to work to create excellent work quality. If you're unsure or don't feel like you have the right support for certain projects, go to your upper management. Talk and get some support for that. Mentoring programs are great within the workplace. So encourage that if you don't already have that within your workplace, because that will help you to be successful. And then get direction in writing. Make sure you're asking questions if you need more information to complete certain projects. All right. These people sound so extreme, right? The bully, the mobbing and groupthink, the predator. You can take bits and pieces from this. You might not have somebody that encompasses all of these qualities, but you might have someone that has some of them. And so we're giving you some techniques to use for predatory behavior or the predator. All right, so what does a predator do? They actively seek ways to discredit the target. They publicly interrupt or correct. They also might talk over somebody or try to silence somebody's ideas in order to not have them be heard if they're insecure about their abilities. Oftentimes you want to silence other people that know what they're talking about. Steals credit. The worst, right? When you work hard to do something and someone steals credit. I always say I don't need credit, right? But I don't want someone else taking credit for the work that I do. So make sure that you're not doing that. And that you're aware if people do it, that you deserve credit for the work you do. Keeps running tally of every error and mistake, does not balance the performance with successes. So this would be somebody that's constantly saying what someone does wrong, but they're not saying all the success that they've also likely had. Because people are not all good and not bad. People do good things, they make mistakes too. So we want to be aware of that balance. Sets unreasonably high standards that cannot be met, denies promotions or other opportunities, attacks targets' personal life, insinuating the impact on their personal performance. All right, so how do you handle these people? Or people that have some of these qualities? You respond assertively with facts and figures, so stick to the facts. Write the facts down so that you have them. Address it in private, so Make sure that you're not putting people on the spot in groups. Wait them out, then finish your thoughts or statements. Sign your work. Deliver your work via email, so you make sure that you're getting that credit that you deserve. Keep your own record and blow your own horn at performance appraisal time. So don't be afraid to talk about your accomplishments, to tell people what you've done well, because sometimes if you don't say it, nobody else is going to say it for you. So be your own advocate. And don't feel bad doing that. I know sometimes it feels awkward to quote unquote brag about what you do, and you don't need to do it in a bragging fashion. You just say what you've done and be proud of that. Point out feasibility of meeting unreasonable standards, ask for compromise. So talk about unreasonable standards. If you have a deadline that is too aggressive, you can negotiate that before you don't deliver on something that is not practical. Copy performance review disagreements in writing to human resources. Don't volunteer information regarding personal difficulties. Ask for clarification on how the personal issue impacted performance. I'm going to pause here for a moment. We're about halfway through. So are there any questions? I know this is a lot of information. Have you encountered individuals like this? Have you encountered people that carry characteristics of bullies, groupthink, or the predator?
I had a question. What was meant by humorous self-talk as a way? I feel like I have recognized the bully just as, not even in a workplace, just as a person in my life. And the first thing was use humorous self-talk. What can you give me an example of that, or what is?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So this can feel uncomfortable for people, so I don't encourage you to do it if it's not a natural technique that feels, again, comfortable to you. So use humorous self-talk. So I think a lot of that is just letting things roll off a little bit, in the sense where you can sort of laugh at yourself. Let's say, let's say somebody makes an unreasonable demand for you or to you. So that's an unreasonable deadline, let's say. You can use humorous self-talk in the way to say, make it somewhat of a joke that you would be able to attain that deadline, right? And so when you add humor to the situation, you could say, well, if I had no personal life, or if I had no other, or if I made it to work every morning at 4 a.m., I could certainly attain that deadline. And certain people can pull off something like that. If you don't feel comfortable, if you feel like that's not going to go over well with someone, don't use that. But I think that is a way to bring attention to the fact that somebody is asking you for too aggressive of a deadline. So again, you don't have to use this way of handling bullies. Some people like to use that way because it feels comfortable for them. And not everything has to be so serious, right? We're in the workplace, but we can use humor when appropriate. Does that make sense? Okay. And just keep it simple. You obviously want to remain professional within your workplace as well. So sometimes joking just doesn't work. But when someone makes an unreasonable demand, that's just one technique that you could use. I agree, though, sometimes it just doesn't go over well, especially with people that are the bully, that are likely to take things more serious. Just know that that can be helpful, though, too, because sometimes it breaks the ice, and sometimes people feel more comfortable when you make light of something. And then it opens up their ability or their comfort level to want to share more openly with you. Anything else? I'm going to circle back to the chat. I saw you had that question in the chat earlier too, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Someone had to drop for a call. I totally get it. I know you're here on your work time. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll just keep moving forward. But again, use that chat tool to stop me at any point. I'll keep circling back. So dealing with difficult personalities, the time bomb. Characteristics of this person: threatens to fire, loses control, yelling in your face behavior. So this is another version of a bully, essentially. So this is just somebody that may act more aggressively and less passively. Has recognized trigger events that staff and coworkers avoid, uses excessive gestures, slams or throws things, curses or threatens, blames target for their behavior, physically touches or threatens the target. So these people are huge liabilities, huge issues within the workplace. Definitely utilize HR in instances like that, end conversations if there's issues of cursing or threatening or someone throwing something. You just stop that conversation, you walk away. So other ways, silence, speak softly. So when somebody's yelling at you, you don't want to yell back at them. It just escalates the situation. Respond assertively without anger. I don't support this. I don't allow this within the workplace. You got to be really clear with your speech. Detach emotionally. So don't focus on what's being said and the why behind the emotions. Write down your feelings. Report it to a higher manager. Report it to PR. Remove yourself. Don't fall into believing this. Keep that positive self-talk. It's obviously this time bomb's problem, not yours. It becomes your problem in that situation, right? So you just want to shut it down. And then respond and don't react emotionally. File a formal complaint. So this is that extreme situation that we can get to that we do not want to get to. If we remain, or if we create those civil workplaces, then we won't have any or as many of the instances like that can occur. So overcome the effects of uncivil behavior. So we may have it occasionally, we hopefully won't have it, but what do we want to do if and when it happens? Determine the line in the sand, identify what you can and cannot tolerate. So set your boundaries. Boundaries are so important. If anyone has ever listened to podcasts by Glennon Doyle, I've listened to some bits and pieces. Another great resource is Brene Brown. So those are great public speakers. Brene Brown is a social worker and a professor, and they have some great ideas about how to set boundaries in your personal lives, which translate over to the workplace as well. So those individuals, again, if you can listen to podcasts or read any of their books, they give you great ways to develop boundaries. Develop an escape plan. So create a professional development plan and set goals. The plan will also enable you to make a business decision on whether to leave or stay. So you might be needing to leave a particular project if you're working in a situation that's unhealthy, so you can negotiate that with upper management. If it gets to a really extreme situation, you may need to leave a position or shift your position. So be really aware of a healthy work environment and what that looks like for you. Identify takeaways that you will use in your future career. Turn a negative experience into a positive learning point for you. So these are all learning experiences as well. Build a support team, recruit family and friends. Also find that coworker at work that you feel comfortable with, that you can run things by. Develop a circle of people that will provide you encouragement and an objective ear. Consult a professional. Meet with a therapist who will give you balance and perspective on the situation. A therapist or somebody in your life that you can go to run things by. Maintain your dignity and self-respect. Don't burn bridges. So you have to rise above a lot of this, which is challenging, but it's worth it in the long run. And then act professionally, not emotionally. And I know a lot of this is common sense, but it's good to just reiterate and to think about what that looks like for you. Strategies to prevent uncivil behavior. So we're talking about ways to combat it initially, what uncivil behavior looks like. Now we want to talk about strategies to prevent it. So identify the warning signs. Higher than usual attrition rate, high number of complaints, cynicism, so think about that, what that would be. So a higher than usual attrition rate. So people are leaving the workplace, people are leaving their jobs because they're unhappy or because of morale. High number of complaints, cynicism, and negative comments that creates a culture of distrust or animosity. So that you want to create transparency within your workplace. You want to create an open door policy so that people can come in and out of your office and feel comfortable talking to you. If there isn't that, people aren't going to feel trust. They're going to feel like they can't bring up certain situations. Increase absenteeism. So maybe people aren't leaving their jobs, but they're not showing up to work, or they're calling in sick more often. Employee isolates self or is ostracized by others. So isolation is a huge sign of this. So people aren't wanting to be part of the team because they feel like when they are, people might be talking behind their backs, or people might not be positive or open to their ideas. So just be aware of this. All right, so there's this cycles of abuse, and we all have an idea of what abuse looks like. It can be physical, it can be emotional, but we want to look at the cycle here and see how that plays into the workplace. So number one, tensions start building. So tensions increase, breakdown of communication, victim feels fearful and feels the need to placate the abuser. So there could be then an incident stemming from that. So verbal, emotional, physical abuse, anger and blaming and arguing, threats and intimidation. So abuse happens within the workplace. We need to be aware of it. Reconciliation, the abuser apologizes, gives excuses, blames the victim, denies the abuse that's occurred, or says that it wasn't as bad as the victim claims. So sort of downplaying that idea that it was abuse. And then calm, incident is forgotten, no abuse is taking place, the honeymoon phase. So this is the cycle of abuse. Maybe you've seen that happen to a friend or a family member. Maybe it's happened to you. Make sure that you're aware of the signs in order to combat those. All right, so ultimately we want to create this environment of inclusion. Exclusion is diversity's kryptonite. So a lot of times exclusion happens in the hiring process. You hire people that are like you, right? That feels more comfortable a lot of times. The fact of the matter is that your workplaces are going to be better when you hire people that are different than you. When you have different people within your departments to bring different ideas, to challenge your thoughts in order to come to the best solutions. So how do we create this culture of inclusion? The goal of diversity awareness is to promote an inclusive work environment. So you want to focus on people's differences. What are they? Get to know the individuals that you're working with, to know what they do well in order to be able to delegate projects correctly and to the right people. So allowing people to work in areas where they work best, where they do best. Sorry, I keep yawning and I'm not even that tired, but sometimes when I talk, it makes me yawn. So I apologize. The solution, focusing on respectful interaction. So using manners, using people's names within the workplace is really important. So people like you to recognize that you know their name. So when you introduce yourself, or when you say hi at the beginning of each workday, use people's names. It allows you to create more comfortable interactions and more personal ones. Understanding biases. So we all have biases. How do we work within them? So maybe you've taken some bias tests online. I'm trying to remember what the name of the one is that we give. The Harvard bias study. I'll look it up real quick. You can take these online for free. And yes, it's called the IAT. So these are the unconscious bias tests online that are available to you. So what you can do is test your different biases in different areas. So we have career biases, we have race biases, we have gender biases. So sometimes, or if you opt to take the race IAT or the cultural IAT, it's called the implicit IAT, or the implicit association test. And what that does is tell you if you have moderate biases or severe biases or minor biases towards certain groups of people. And what that does is just help you to create awareness. I remember when I got my career bias results and my gender bias results, I felt a little defensive at first, right? And then I realized, you know what, I do have those biases because my culture, my education, my environment, and the way that I was brought up all helped me to have those biases. And really, ultimately, I realized that having those biases are to my advantage because it allows me to be educated and allows me to realize how to treat people, no matter what my biases are. So I encourage you to take that IAT. Again, you can just Google it online. Implicit association test. In order to, someone said, what's the test? It's called the IAT. I'm writing this in the chat. Implicit association test. This is often encourage people to take certain ones. You can do it together, a lot of time for them to do that. And then you can create a discussion and people can share if they want to. Some people might feel uncomfortable sharing their results, so don't make anybody do that. But it's interesting because people will say, wow, I'm surprised. I know I had a colleague that took the career bias test and it showed that she was more biased towards people that had full-time careers than she was to people that worked at home. So raised their kids and were worked from home. So, and she said, that's so odd because she said, I've always worked full-time. My friends always worked full-time. My parents always worked full-time. Why would I have a bias towards people that did that? And it's just something that's nice to explore. All right, and then fundamental attribution errors. So that can happen when you attribute certain errors to certain people based on stereotypes that you have. So be careful of that. Subtle stereotyping, so taking action on those biases. It's okay that you have those biases, but you don't want to take action on them. And then virtually impeccable inequities. So having certain expectations of certain groups that they have to accomplish things certain ways where you don't expect that from other people. So just being aware of that so that you don't do that. You don't want to settle stereotype. You don't want to create virtually imperceptible inequities. You want to understand your biases and talk about those and be open about those in order to work through them. You want to have an organizational approach to inclusion. So you want to create some sort of vision statement to create an inclusive environment. You want to talk about that with your teams. What does that look like? And come to it together with your teams. Individual approach to inclusion. So how is each individual going to be inclusive within your workplace? Manager behaviors. So upper management sets the tone for this. What are the manager behaviors? Are they encouraging trainings like this in order for people to be better equipped and better educated? It sounds like your organizations are doing that, so that's great. That's a great first step. And then just showing general respect for people, looking people in the eyes, giving time for people when they have questions, saying thank you to people that help and support you. Respect is number one. It's so important. I'm going to just turn it over to you really quick. How are ways that you can be respectful within your workplaces? We've talked about it a little bit. Zuline said, my team members do a different category every month. It can be eye-opening. That's awesome. So what are some examples of categories, Zuline, that your teams do?
So Annie, we've done the different categories within that implicit association test that you were talking about. So
nice.
We schedule it once a month and we all do a different category and just kind of see where, you know, we end up on it. We don't necessarily share our scores, but we just kind of share the insights that we learn.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's great. I think that's great too. People can share their scores, of course, if you want to. You don't need to encourage that. But yes, just saying, asking people how they felt. How did you feel with your results of taking that test? Were you surprised by your results? And just creating a conversation around it. That's great. So you might have a topic of gender one month. A topic of what else could you have? Career one month. How your career impacts life. Separating that and creating a balance between career and personal life is really important. You could talk about something like mindfulness, which clearly I have a love in meditation and mindfulness. And so that has a great place within the workplace because it allows you to clear your mind. Just taking a few breaths at your desk and encouraging that for your employees can help to de-stress and can help people to be more aware of their surroundings. So I like that, creating a different topic each month that you just weave within your team meetings or within emails that go out to your team. That's a great idea. How else do you show respect within your workplaces? What do you do, or what have you seen other people do?
I think for me, it goes back to, sorry, I have a very bad cold.
It's okay.
Using the person's name, but also making everybody feel included in the conversation, I think is very important to show that you want to have everybody's opinion be heard, and it's not just my game, it's everybody's game, and we need to do this together as a team, and how can we use everyone's voice at the table? So that's a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And I feel like it might seem small, but it means a lot to people. And it really shows that they matter. It allows people to know that you care about them. You're taking the time to say their name, to let them know that you know their name. I know that I've had so many friends tell me that they've been frustrated in social situations when they have to introduce themselves to someone multiple times. It's such a turnoff. And there's this idea that it takes 10 times to reverse a bad first impression. So just consider that. It's not bad to ask somebody to say, I know I remember meeting you. Tell me your name again. It's appropriate to do that one time, but you as a professional should work to know people's names. If that means that you need to write people's names down when you meet them so that you remember it, do that. But it goes a long way with people. I have several friends that work in sales, and they're really good at this. They're good at remembering people's names because that's part of their training, right? And I think we can all benefit from doing that. Yes, those simple ways can go really far. Anything else? What does perhaps upper management do to show appreciation to employees? where you work, or maybe it was somewhere where you've worked in the past. How do you show gratitude towards your coworkers?
I think it's kind of, it goes along with like remembering someone's name, but remembering something specific that they said and then following up with it. Mm-hmm. So like just, I mean, Teresa is my upper management, so her remembering what I said I was going to do over the weekend, and then on Monday saying, how was that specific thing you did on the weekend? That's a big deal for me, because it makes you feel heard and like someone's paying attention because they care.
Absolutely. Creating those personal relationships is so important, and doing it in a genuine way. Doing it in a way where you know when people genuinely care, right? And that goes a long way within the workplace too. So it also just shows that you are listening. It's as simple as that. People want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to know that you're listening to them. And of course, use your discretion, because not everybody always wants to share about what they do on the weekend or their personal lives. But don't be afraid once you know someone to say, how's your family doing? Or I know you mentioned that your mom was sick. Is she doing better? That must be really hard. All right. So just letting people know that they're seen and they're heard. I love that, Chelsea. I feel like it's simple, but again, it goes far. And it helps to create that team environment too. You're going to work better with people when you know them better. There's a study that I read recently that says that when you spend time overnight with someone, you instantly create a bigger connection to them. So that's to say, if you're, let's say maybe my son, for example, is going to camp next week, and he's going to spend the night in a cabin with some friends, and they're going to stay there for a few days. And the idea is that they're going to be closer as individuals when they come back. Now, my thought about that, and this was what the study came to find too, is that you're spending significant time with people. And so because of that, you're going to bridge a deeper connection or more of a relationship. So think about overnight in the way of the workplace. If you're working full time, you are likely spending more hours with people that you're working with than you are with your family or people in your personal lives, more awake hours, right? Relationship those people, so that you're going to work more efficiently at work. So I think that idea of overnight relates very much to the workplace, because the reality is that it simply means that you're closer because you're spending more time together. You're getting to know each other. So you could spend time with you and then collaborate to get to know the place and the people in it. All right, so we'll end with communicating with respect. You gave me some ideas, and then I'll have some time for questions, at least a minute or so. So listen carefully first, encourage others to share their opinions and ideas, but don't interrupt them. Don't be afraid to have moments of silence. We get uncomfortable sometimes in our culture with silence, but it's okay. Let that happen, because sometimes the best ideas come from giving people time to think and respond. Adjust your style to match the other person's preferences. The best way to find his or her preferences out is to simply ask. And so maybe that might be the environment that you meet with someone in at a review. Ask them where they feel most comfortable. You know the people that you work with that might not be morning people. So if you know that about them, then schedule your time with them in the afternoons. Consider what you say. It should be true, necessary, and helpful. I love that. What you say should be true, necessary, and helpful. So just give your time to prepare and think before you speak. Never insult others, avoid nitpicking, criticizing insignificant things, or sounding demeaning or judgmental. A lot of times what that means is just, you don't have to say something sometimes. It's okay to just listen. All right, so any questions or any final thoughts, anything that came up for you?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, I think this was all great information that it's always just good reminders of things that, you know, when you're in the work environment, how to be respectful to your coworkers, how to deal with a bully. Also understanding that from a bully's perspective, they may not understand what they're doing, and they may never change their way of doing things either, even if it's pointed out to them in a nice way. So having to just be able to adjust and adapt for that environment. So I think it was really good, and I just want to say thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I definitely agree with you. A lot of this is probably information that you already knew, but it's a good refresher, and it might take it to a different direction or give you a different perspective. And that's really what our goal is. Every time I teach these training courses, I learn more from all of you than I do from the material. So it really, I really appreciate you sharing how you apply this and how your different workplaces apply it, and keep doing what you're doing. It's great that you're offering these trainings and that you're allowing people the opportunity to just explore what they're doing and to reflect on it. So my email is abstare@columbus.gov. So let me know if you have any questions or if you have any more ideas or feedback for me. If you want to know more about that implicit association test, you can always ask me about that as well. That was developed by Harvard again. So if you want to look that up, that's a great resource. And if there aren't any other questions, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed talking to all of you. So I hope these, both of these trainings were beneficial for you.
Thank you, Annie. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Zulene.
Bye.